Good evening and welcome to Africa's Vision Network. Africa's Vision Network features African cultural awareness, economic opportunity, economic empowerment, spirituality, religion, education, and other issues focusing on the African world. I'm Robin Roberts, your host, and an African living in the diaspora. Today we have Vincent Brown with us. Vincent Brown is very special to us at Africa's Vision Network because most of the time when he's here, he is part of the crew, but today he's going to share his another side of himself. He's going to tell us about his journey as an artist. Welcome to the show, Vincent.
Thank you. I'm glad you have me on this side of the camera.
Okay, Vincent, can you tell us what medium, art mediums do you use to, express yourself?
Photography and videography.
Okay, photography and videography, and can you tell us how you first became involved with photography and videography?
As a child, I wanted to make movies, and it was a dream I pursued off and on throughout my life. I actually graduated from high school. When I was in high school, I was the editor of the school newspaper.
Okay.
And after I graduated, I went to UDC and did a semester or two of what was then called the television film. Mm-hmm. Was combined as the communications mass media program. But I didn't stick with it that long. Mm-hmm. Settled down, had a family, and started working. And I had an opportunity 10 years ago to go back to school. And I took it, and the first class was photography. Okay. And at the end of the class, I was so proud of the work I'd accomplished. Mm-hmm. That I kind of figured maybe this is something I can do.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned that you began working. I'd like you to explain to the audience that you actually have a regular grind. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. And so that art isn't something that's out of the reach of people with a regular, 9-to-5 type mm-hmm. of existence.
Well, my longest job was 13 years, and that was Northwest Airlines. And even during that period, I took classes on the side. Mm-hmm. I did whatever I could. Also in music, I DJ'd and I did sound reinforcement, weddings, that sort of thing. But I always made sure, even though I had a full-time job, mm-hmm. that I gave myself time, to pursue the endeavors I wanted to pursue. After Northwest Airlines, I began to do several jobs at once. At that point, I felt comfortable in doing videography, supporting myself that way. And then I found myself able to attend UDC again. And I've worked since that time. For the last 6 years, I'm a production assistant.
Oh, okay.
I found a way to do it.
Is that a production assistant in video or something like that?
Studio, yeah. So
okay,
that's
okay.
video. So I was able to even hone more of my skills and make more contacts. But the whole time working,
okay.
I've always worked while doing this. It's tough, but if you manage your time, mm-hmm. it's doable.
Okay. Is it expensive?
No. I'm glad you asked that question because that's a question that many people ask. The technology today allows for anyone to make a film. The cameras allow for anyone to take great pictures. Okay. And I actually bought some of the equipment that I use.
Okay. Can you explain some of this equipment here?
Okay, it looks complicated, but it's not. This is your standard digital camera, and I found out that it had video on it. So if you have one of these cameras, it could be a popular one is your Canon Rebel. This is an Olympus, but mm-hmm. it's a digital camera. Most of them come with HD video.
Okay.
So I began to videotape with this 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Now what really was a game changer for me, and I think it's for everyone, is your smartphones, and this is your regular, iPhone, are equipped with great video.
Okay.
So I began to use that. More and more equipment became available at a consumer level, meaning cheap. So mm-hmm. one device that I discovered was basically a microphone which can attach to an iPhone, and it gives you a really clear sound.
Okay.
So I have used an iPhone and what I call my fuzzy wuzzy, but this microphone to film commercials, short films, music videos. And they come
Okay.
out crisp, clear, the audio. And you've actually seen some of what I've
Oh,
done.
yes, I have.
So now I'm ready to step my game up even further because I discovered there's a boom mic. And this is 120. Just to back up a little bit, this microphone, you can get this at Best Buy for about around $60.
Okay.
Not expensive at all. This microphone made by Tascam, which is a very reputable sound equipment company. It's a boom mic which can just simply attach to any camera, and it gives you a very professional sound because it's a boom mic. It will zero right in on the person talking or whatever's going on. And the beauty of it is that it can work by itself. So you don't necessarily always have to have it attached to a camera, and it's battery powered.
Okay.
So this allows you the technology to, when you're filming, you really want something to sound as best it can. It's a boom mic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
Portable, huh?
yep. And the pole itself, I use for everything. But those of you out there in TV land, cable land, who know a little bit about film production, you'll probably, you know, sure your mouth is wide open. Because
Yeah, I haven't seen that before.
right, but all of this equipment is cheap. And as for the smartphone and this microphone, and there's a program, an app called, of course the name is going to escape me, Filmic, Filmic.
Okay.
It's an app, and it allows you, it allows your smartphone to do what the closest to what a real camera would do.
Okay.
As far as giving you a large cinematic scope,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
and if you have the right microphone and if you know what you're doing and you have the right lens, you can make a professional film. In fact, a film by the name of Tangerine, and I think it's available on Netflix, but I saw it at the movies when it came out, was made with a smartphone, and it won an Academy. Not for best film, but I believe for best lighting or cinematography, but
Oh, really?
it won an Academy. It was,
Okay.
So this is a film made on a smartphone, an iPhone, with the resolution and the sound that it could be played in a movie theater.
I'm going to check that out. I'd
Yes.
like to see how they did that.
You're right, right. The color looked a little saturated, but for the subject matter of the film, it worked.
Okay.
So I try to push these products, well, not push them, but I tell as many people as possible that the technology is with, you know, it's within reach.
So now how do you keep abreast of the technology?
I've subscribed to, and it's free.
Okay.
I subscribe to different magazines and newsletters that are just dedicated to the newest equipment, festivals, all that.
Okay.
All of that. And I experiment. You know, I came across this I saw it in a store, and I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe what it was and how cheap it was. So a lot of it is trial and error. I'll hear about equipment, but I think for the foreseeable future, that is going to be my arsenal. It's really all I need for what I'm doing right now.
Very nice. Not too difficult to carry either. It's like lightweight, small. Okay.
And again, you can do a lot with it. So there's really no excuse to jump into the game of making documentaries, making music videos, record a wedding, a number of uses.
And inevitably, you will be asked to do that,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
sure.
yes.
Okay, so with photography and videography, we have a kind of chicken or the egg question. Which one do you prefer?
Photography is instant. You know, that's you take the picture, you look at it, instant gratification, satisfaction. The word is escaping me.
You can coin phrases on this show.
Oh, okay. Well, you just open up the door for all kinds of stuff. My love is movie making, filmmaking, videography, because that's a process. That I
Okay.
enjoy. That's something I've enjoyed since I was a kid, taking things apart, putting it together, and I like doing things in solitude. So
Oh, okay.
with videography, I can pull together footage, audio, and then I just lock myself in my room and do it. I love that.
So you said it's a process with the videography. So
Yes.
could you kind of, give us a few bullet points?
Okay. There's simple rules that apply to photography and videography, and there's mistakes that a lot of people make. But always remember when you're shooting, not to shoot toward a light, how to frame a shot, which a lot of people have difficulty doing. I mean, it's just most people have not received formal photography,
Right.
But of course, us being here at the studio, we know how to frame a shot. But for the
Okay.
audience, how to center a person, your lighting, headroom, things like that.
Okay.
That kind of separates a consumer, or I should say a professional, from an amateur.
Okay.
So
do you do a storyboard?
I've started to do that because my projects have become longer,
Okay.
more and more length of time and more complicated.
Okay.
And it helps that I read a lot of comic books when I was a kid, which is, and again, this is
Yeah,
something.
that is true.
Yeah, and which, and that's a point there that storyboarding is really like writing a comic book.
And for our audience who don't understand what a storyboard is, would you explain what a storyboard is?
It's a way in which you can explain to your camera person or to the actors what the action, is going to be. Based off a script or an idea, you can start. And again, if you think of a comic strip, each panel is going to show some kind of action.
Okay.
It could be as simple as a conversation, going back and forth. Most of the time, a storyboard gives a good idea of where a character is going to stand, what action is going to have in a particular scene. So it's sort of it's part of pre-production.
Okay, and it's pictures. So
Yeah,
and
usually
it looks sort
drawn,
of like
yeah.
a comic strip
It really does.
sequence.
And I've actually returned to reading comic books so that I can make better decisions on shots and how I want a story to go.
Okay.
Because I usually I like to urge parents who are at that stage where they want to teach their child to read.
Yeah.
I always encourage them to use comic books.
Oh yeah, that's
Because
a
a
good
child
idea.
wants to keep up with the action that's going on, so you have to learn how to read. So when I was small, I'm reading The Incredible Hulk or Fantastic Four. I
Right.
wanted to know what was going on, so if I came up against a big word, I would look it up, so that I can know the action was going.
Right.
And it helps spur the imagination, because if you think about it, you're making a movie in your mind as you're reading a comic book.
Okay.
You're looking at 6 panels, and in your mind, you've created this fight scene
Okay.
with sound effects, and it's imagination. So that's really what a storyboard is. You're gonna put your ideas down on paper, and the filming process is you're gonna make that comic book come to life. That
I
and
see.
that
I
is kind of the way I
never
think
made
about it.
that connection. I did read some comic books, but I hadn't really thought of it that way. But I can see where that would really help a lot.
I mean, because storyboarding, if you were to look at a storyboard, it looks like a comic book.
Yeah.
It would be broken into 6 panels, and there's action going on, and there's a progression of action going on.
And since we're talking about videos, maybe we can introduce a few of the videos that you've done now.
Great. Yes.
The first one we'd like to show is the one called, the horror one that was called City Walk?
City Trip.
City Trip. Could you explain a little bit about it?
This year, I decided to enter into a few film contests. The huge challenges. Most of them are free. Some of them cost, $100 or whatever. The second one I entered was called the Colchester film festival, and Colchester's in England, but they welcome entrants from all over the world. It was free. You can pick your own genre. So city trip, going to the city was the thing. Okay, so a lot of these film challenges, they'll give you a theme, they'll give you the genre, a line of dialogue, all of that. So
Okay.
because it was supposed to be about going to the city, my wife and I fashioned a story around it, where a woman new to the city finds herself lost in the woods. So it kind of follows the the horror cliche, the woman lost in the woods and all that. But my wife and I did it by ourselves, our little story, and had fun doing it.
Yeah, I'm smiling because that was actually my favorite.
Okay.
And I don't like horror, but I just like that one. It was a little bit funny because you could kind of see that she was entering kind of a trap.
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we're going to go cut to that particular film, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
This park in particular was the last one I wanted to show you.
Why's that?
There's a story about it.
A story?
That in these woods is a man, and he snatches women and he keeps them locked up.
That was a scary city trip. Another film that we have with us today that you filmed, that you made, is called Color Code.
Yes.
Can you give us, a brief outline of what was going on in Color Code?
I have 3 or 4 friends who are tattoo artists, and we would talk about it's like a invisible line, or I should say, I'm not saying the tattoo industry is segregated in DC, but there's definitely a line that's been drawn. So I got the fellas to kind of talk about their experience and being a black tattoo artist, what they love about working on, black skin, and just talk about what they would like to see younger tattoo artists do. The industry is blowing up all over the country, and I'm sure you're aware of it because you see more and more young people with tattoos.
Yeah, I do.
So there are a lot of shops in DC, but believe it or not, only a handful are black owned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of tattoo artists.
Right.
A lot of them work in white shops.
Oh.
But as far as
so
black-owned
they
shops,
don't have their own.
right. And it's sad to say, after the video was made, where the main person who the main person that you're introduced to is Chris Mensa, and it was filmed at his shop, Pens and Needles on U Street. He has since closed the shop.
I'm
And-
sorry to hear that.
Right, and one of the reasons was that he just couldn't draw business, and that's U Street.
Okay.
But the shops around him, were white, and they just simply get the clientele.
Oh, so they get more, the white shops got more clientele. I
Right.
am actually surprised about that. So I have to ask, do you actually have a tattoo?
I have about 24,
Okay.
but I started
A
back.
mother's horror.
Well, none on my chest, none on my neck. I would never go above my shoulders.
Okay.
So they're 12 on each arm. And I
So-
started in high school and I've just accumulated them over 20 years.
So when it started in high school, was your mom, on board with that idea?
She didn't see it. The first tattoo I got, me and my best friend from high school, we made this vow. When we graduate from high school, we're going to get a tattoo. So we went to Great Southern, which is located in Hyattsville. At the time, really redneck. really, I mean, because at that time, we're talking 86,
Right.
the people, who you saw, most of the time with a tattoo were military
Oh,
and
yeah.
motorcycle gang members.
Yeah.
So this particular place in Maryland had, Marine and motorcycle gang clientele. So we're sitting in there with, some really tough, um, really tough guys. And we both decided to get these really tiny Chinese symbols,
Okay.
like this big. And I was actually showing it off to people, like, look, the tattoo. So small, my mom literally did not notice it.
Okay. Okay.
And I never
okay.
told her.
I'm going to check my son out in a few minutes. I just want to know.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to see color code, and we'll be right back.
When I actually started tattooing, I only knew of 2 black tattoo artists. 3, I'm sorry. That was Jackie Grisham, Zulu, and Craig Foster. And those only reason why I knew of those 3 were because of tattoo magazines.
Almost say it was almost like it was just a white thing, because that's all I really saw ever was white folks, magazines, and stuff like that.
Initially, it was intimidating because it was the lack of brown. However, actually seeing those 3 in tattoo magazines was the inspiration that was like, I can do this shit too.
I gotta say that I definitely met a lot of cool people, but a lot of times you get some cats checking you out like, man, does this guy really tattoo? Or, oh man, this is the B team. You know what I mean? You're like, what the fuck? Maybe there's not as much coverage. I mean, they segregate the magazines, you know what I'm saying? It crosses over sometimes, but you got a tattoo magazine that appeals to every lifestyle and culture now, you know what I mean? But in a way, it's kind of segregating it, Dare say like Tyler, Commander. I don't know. That could have been somewhere between 10 and 15, maybe. When I think about it, you know what I mean? Because there were shops over towards where 8th Street was for years. There's been a couple of shops off on Bladensburg Road that have been around for years. Definitely on George Avenue. You know what I mean? So yeah, there was cats tattooing.
For any young black tattoo artist entering the business, I would say study art. Go to art school. Go to museums. Study art, not tattoos. Because a lot of people get into it based on a monetary dollar amount. And, it's going to come a point in time where you got to go above what you normally see and come up with something actually creative.
I definitely want to see more of folks of color tattooing and actually taking it serious as a business as well as an art form. The younger folks definitely, the money's cool or whatever, but I'd rather for them to learn it the right way and understand that it's bigger than just being in your basement and everything.
Welcome back. So remember, your child may have a tattoo and you not know it. I'm still kind of upset, but it's okay. I'm not young anymore, so maybe I just won't ever understand that. Our last film that we're going to show that you've done is called Trudge. I have to admit, I did see it and I was a bit confused. I didn't quite understand it. So could you really, enlighten us?
The concept for Trudge was is the product, or I should say, it was conceived by a friend of mine named Terrence Nicholson. He's an artist, and as the case with most artists, he gets abstract ideas.
Yes.
So the video itself is kind of open-ended as to the interpretation of it.
Okay.
We follow a man as he's making a journey.
Yes.
And it ends up ambiguous, you know, and it's really open for, you know, interpretation, like I said before. People are going to get it right off the bat. Some people never get it. Some people tell me later on they got it. Sometimes they get out of it what I got out of it, you know.
Okay.
Sometimes they don't. And Terrence explained it to me, and I didn't get it. So, and in the end, that's what he wanted to do as an artist. He wanted to make a piece of art that you couldn't easily decipher. To him, that's art.
Okay.
He views art as not something to make people comfortable, or you know, looking at a painting and right off the bat going, oh, I like that. That looks great. He's more into the painting you have to look at and then look at again and look at it one more time to kind of get it.
Okay.
And you're either going to think it's ugly or beautiful at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the video, the best way I could kind of describe it.
And I don't feel bad.
No, don't. It's.
And so, what did you get out of it?
I got out of it that the character in the video was shedding himself. He had taken on a habit or something negative, and it was weighing him down. And he's really going through this difficult. It's a trudge.
Okay.
So you know, it's the slow motion pace and him carrying the weight. You know, so
Yeah, I
to me
remember
it was
that.
sort of literal, but I think because of the pacing of it, and just the, you know, what's going on,
Okay.
you know, as you're watching it. But I interpreted it as someone who finally unloads this burden, which they picked up themselves.
Okay. Okay. Now I see.
Yeah.
Now I see.
But I could be wrong.
That's the point, right?
Right.
Okay. So now we're going to get into some of the photographs that you've taken. Recently, you had an exhibit at the Anacostia Art Center.
Yes.
Would you, a solo exhibit, would you explain what the exhibit was about?
The exhibit was called City Under Siege, and I conceived it as a commentary on gentrification in D.C., the city being under siege by all of this construction. So
Okay.
my original idea was to just go around the city and take pictures of all the cranes, all the building going on. Because one day it struck me that you can be in any part of the city, and if you just make a circle, if you look at the sky, turn around, just look up, you'll see a crane.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
And
Okay, that's true.
it's just the one day I really took notice of it, and it alarmed me. It's like, wow, I've never noticed this many cranes. Northwest, northeast, of course, we all know in southwest,
Yeah.
all the construction. So that was the intent, but at the same time, I was walking around and just taking pictures of homelessness with my iPhone. So those pictures began to eclipse my original concept.
Okay.
You know, and I kept the name because for some people, they may think that the city is suddenly, those people who pay attention to the homeless population may view it as the city is under siege by the homeless.
Right.
To me, it's all sort of related. You know, we're
Yeah.
looking at a lot of construction, but at the same time, there is, to me, a sizable increase in homelessness on the street.
Yeah. So we have a lot of construction and a lot of seemingly displacement.
Right, and to me, it comes down to, well, where are the resources going? You know, if so much revenue is, if the city is attracting so much revenue, and the revenue is coming into the city with the startup companies, the tech companies, all the construction, and you know, the taxes off of the property, all of that, it doesn't seem to be going toward the people.
Okay.
I'm a lifelong Washington, D.C. resident, and I've
okay.
never seen this much homelessness. Never, never. Whole families, entire families, more women than I've ever seen before,
Yeah.
younger people,
Yeah.
veterans, and the places. So in the series of photographs, some of the pictures were taken around, for instance, they were taken around the Reeve Center at 14th and U Street. This is a
Okay.
government building, and there's homeless people in the doorways, sleeping in the middle of the day. They're in the doorway of there's a post office on the ground level. There's
Right.
the homeless people in that doorway.
Okay.
And if anyone's familiar with the front of the Reeve Center on
Yeah.
the U Street, the
Yeah.
bushes, there are homeless people living in the bushes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right,
Yeah.
but no, a lot of people don't pay attention, or it's out of sight, but it's not really that far out of sight. It's
Yeah.
there. Excuse me. Benches, the sidewalk, underneath of bridges. I mean, DC is on its way to look like Los Angeles, Miami, places like that, where you have whole entire like shanty towns.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone who's familiar with the area by Union Station, I think that's
Yeah.
3rd Street. It's a shanty town. The police take it down, and it will just reappear
reerect it.
because homelessness isn't going anywhere. You're just moving people around. So I had so many pictures at some point that it turned into something different. Something that was supposed to be about buildings turned into something about people.
And how did you get it into that art center, and get like a solo exhibit?
I'm fortunate to know one of the curators, and that's Terrence Nicholson, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
We had talked about doing a show, and he's been impressed with my photography skills for a while, and I've actually done a music video for him and his band. So,
He's in that band. Okay.
yes, he's in Phthalo Blue.
Okay.
Very talented, very interesting, and very, very good brother. And I took him up on offer. He was like, hey, when you're ready to, I can fit you in. I can fit you in a schedule. A slot opened up, this year, and I took it. And it was a perfect, it just turned out to be a really good show, really good space. So that's how I wound up there.
Gloria and I, the producer of the show, we went to see the exhibit. It was really very nice and very impressive.
Thank you,
It was,
thank you.
Official, gallery showing.
And again, just to let the public know, it was done with an iPhone.
Okay.
I'm not pushing Apple products. You can do the same thing with Samsung, any smartphone, but the camera it's that impressive. It's HD, and it was just immediate.
Okay.
I think if I was walking around, with a full camera kit, I would have missed many of the pictures I took.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point,
Right.
actually.
Because most of the time I didn't have my camera on me. I
Okay.
just had the phone on me, and I saw images, and I would look around. There's one photograph, Georgetown Blues, and it depicts. It's a strange image because it looked like a person took a number of shopping carts, draped an American flag over it, but enough carts that it almost looks like a train because it's one cart behind another cart behind another cart.
Yeah.
And in the front of it is a plastic buggy, a toy
Yeah,
buggy.
I saw that one.
Yeah, I saw it, and I couldn't believe no one else was taking pictures of it. There's more to the picture. The picture that the viewers will see, you see just one part of it.
And that's the alley in Georgetown, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
and that was the point I was about to make. You could see that wall from M Street. I forgot
really?
what bank it used
Oh.
to be. It's still a bank at the corner of Wisconsin and M
Riggs?
Street. Riggs.
Yeah.
So that's the parking lot behind Riggs.
Oh, really?
Right.
Okay.
So,
I
yeah.
wonder. I'll have to go and see if there's
Right.
anything there now.
Yeah, right. I don't know if it's still erect, but yeah. So anyone who's familiar with 14th and U, Wisconsin and M Street, and those Riggs Bank, they'll recognize that wall, and they'll also say this isn't a side street, this isn't an alleyway, this is
Right.
out in the open. And this
Yeah.
was there, and I didn't see any number of people taking pictures of it or talking to the gentleman or whatever. I took the picture and showed it to people, and people were like, I was there yesterday, I didn't notice it. And I have some pictures, other pictures in the exhibit where you see people just lying out in the sidewalk.
Okay.
Just incredible stuff, incredible images. But the impression that I ultimately came to, I should say, the conclusion I came to from all of these photographs, is people don't pay attention enough. And there doesn't seem to be any empathy
Yeah.
for people, which is very disturbing to me.
I would say so. I was going to make that point that the obviously the photographer and the videographer are paying attention, you
Yeah.
know, observing things that it's there for everybody else to see, but they're just not actually looking at it that way, you know, or even noticing it.
Right, right. I think one advantage or what has helped me become the photographer I've become is that I pay attention to details now. I used to live a very, very, fast-paced life. The 13 years I worked in Northwest Airlines, I was also raising a son, taking care of my mother, and my health finally collapsed, or because of health issues, I had to leave Northwest.
Okay.
And because I was dealing with issues which I basically developed epilepsy.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I've had epilepsy for the last 10 years. So because I was constantly in fear of having a seizure, anyone who has epilepsy or has a loved one with epilepsy the warning sign is very quick. As soon as you feel it coming on, and it's happening.
Okay.
So I knew people who injured themselves, and some people it actually killed them, where they had a seizure somewhere unexpectedly and they fell, hit their head. So I was always afraid of that. So all that to say, my life began to become like in slow motion, because I had to pay attention to each second, because I wanted to react when I felt anything strange. So
Yeah.
as a result, whereas I used to walk past a tree or a flower or a person, just being fast paced, which is the
Right.
pace of the world today, I was slow. I paid attention to everything. And then it opened up a whole new world. So I was able to take pictures of images that I believe the average person walks past. And to this day, I do it. I cannot walk down the street without taking a picture of something. So I credit that. I credit that with the eye I have developed to take pictures.
That is that is very interesting. Sort of making the best out of a situation, making some lemonade, I guess, and something that we're all called on to do from time to time
Right.
If we want to cope anyway.
Right, right. And it was just that's the way I coped with it. The seizures are under control, but during the period of time where I hadn't yet, mastered it, or I should say, I was still dealing with it, where it was a constant danger. It wound up, helping me, give me, I don't want to say an advantage over other photographers, but it opened me up as a photographer to the world around me, stuff I was just missing. I was, driving to work, working, coming home,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
that,
missed so
that
much.
syndrome.
Right now, I look back and say to myself, "Wow, I missed a lot." I was
Yeah.
there for my son. It was work, family.
Okay.
But
Okay.
everything else, it was just a blur.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you if the sky was clear.
And when you were doing that, you weren't. I'm assuming that you weren't involved in too much artistic, exploits at that point.
Nah, I wasn't.
So this this illness is something that kind of was a catalyst.
Yeah, yeah. I was involved with. I was still doing DJing. So maybe I didn't mention. I DJed in my early 20s.
Okay.
It was something I really, really wanted to do, and I was frustrated because didn't turn out the way I wanted to, but I still continued to do it. So I guess that's why me becoming a photographer came out of nowhere for me. It was not what I intended to do. But I did not want to give up the dream of going into film, but I had to go through these classes, if that kind of makes sense. I really wanted to be a DJ. So I kept doing it even when I worked. But then when I developed epilepsy, I put the DJing to the side, and you know, the skill of photography overtook music. If that kind of makes sense. I hope I'm not going
Yeah,
around in
no,
circles.
no,
Yeah.
it makes sense. So actually, I would think that being a photographer helps with videography anyway, because it helps you frame shots.
Yeah, it does. It does.
You know, with a better eye.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, cinema is based on the camera, so it's moving pictures. So once you master that, and that specialty would be cinematography, just which again is in filmmaking. I enjoy that part of the process almost as much as editing, setting up the shot and getting the image I want.
Okay.
So yes, one feeds to another. If you're a good photographer, you should be a good videographer
Yeah,
or a good director.
I noticed, which is probably what I really liked about the horror film. What was it called?
City Trip.
City Trip. There were a lot of shots in there, different angles. You know, like maybe you just had somebody's eyes or something, and building up to the way the photos, or well, actually they were moving, but it seemed like there were photos in it too, moving to this climax and all.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. That felt really artsy to me.
Yeah, I guess I'm leaning toward I didn't just watch horror films when I was younger. I watched Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Okay, yeah.
And I didn't just watch, martial arts movies. I saw, Kurosawa movies. So I was lucky that really I have to credit my mother. She took me to all types of movies.
Oh, yeah.
So the movies that she was taking me to have finally sort of the things that I saw kind of coming to light now. So I want to improve upon and continue with that kind of mastery of storytelling. Instead of just being really static and have, one person talk to another person, it doesn't really convey emotion like you said, doing a close-up of people's eyes or watching what their hands are doing. It's all storytelling, a person's body language. And if you can capture it in a film, on film, it improves the storytelling.
Okay. Yeah, it did. I was, I was impressed, and I was like, I think I could do that.
You could.
That's what I'd like about a working class artist. Like, this is something, as you said earlier in the interview, that everybody can actually, bring their storytelling skills to filmmaking and make a film.
Yeah.
Or do a photography exhibit.
Right. And I think most people, they may not realize it or not, they've gone to film school their entire life. You've watched films, you just didn't understand what was going on behind the curtain. It's not magic. it's not magic, but it's more of a science. Understanding if you see something as simple as a conversation on television, it could be a 1-minute conversation, but it could have taken all day to film it. There's a science behind it.
Yeah.
You would shoot, one person, person A, then shoot person B, and shoot them together talking, one over the shoulder. I hope this language isn't going over the heads of many people watching, but next time you watch a film, count how many cuts you see in a scene. And a cut would just be what you're seeing. It's like that scene. So just think of if you're watching two people talk, you're going from one person's face to another. That's a cut.
That's a cut? Okay.
That's a cut. Or you're going from the table to a person to their eyes. That's 3 cuts.
Okay.
And that's what most movies are. It's basically one photograph one photograph followed by another photograph followed by another photograph, which goes back to like the idea of a storyboard. Same thing. You want to convey a story.
Okay.
You want to figure out what's going to be the right picture, the right frame, the way you want to tell the story, and then you put it all together. You know, again, it's not magic; it's a science to it.
Okay. So let's switch up a little bit. In this digital age, do you still use film to do photography?
I wish I could, but here in DC, I know of maybe 2 or 3 places that actually you can develop film. One of which is UDC. The second place is Glen Echo Park.
Really?
$15 an hour, something like that. It's open to the public. The chemicals, the paper, it can add up. I love the look of film. 2 of my favorite pictures were from photography class. One is a picture of a gentleman named Jahari,
Yeah.
and the other picture was a young lady named Natalie.
Okay.
And the film, the look of film to me is deep. You know, video, it's kind of flat. You know, you now have cameras which can really give you an idea of depth. You know.
So when you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say kind of flat, are you talking about digital photographs as
right.
opposed to film photographs?
Right.
So digital is kind of flat.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It looks clear. It could have bright colors, but it's just not as warm. I would compare it to the argument DJs make, or people who prefer vinyl over CDs or anything digital.
Oh, yeah.
Vinyl sounds warmer. Now people will argue you down, you know, but as a DJ and a person who prefers vinyl, that's how I look at film versus digital, you know. But it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. Most films you see in Hollywood are still made on film, but these are multi-million-dollar films. So luckily you have video cameras and lenses made for digital equipment which can imitate the look of film.
Oh, really? So they can get that depth?
Yes,
Okay.
to get that look. That's really the difference. Video originally, you know, used for news programs and all that, sports events. It didn't need to, you know, it worked fine.
Didn't have any depth, yeah.
It didn't need to have it, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Not like a film, you know,
Yeah,
when you're
right.
trying to show some emotions.
Right.
And
Skin tones, you can improve the color, all of that. But it's expensive and it's time consuming. But if I had the money and the time, I would probably just use film.
Okay, so, but in the digital age, so photography is a little less expensive these days.
Right.
Okay.
I immediately, upon graduating from, well, not graduated, but when I finished the photography class, I searched for places to develop film, couldn't find them, so I wound up purchasing my digital camera,
Okay.
which was very much like the camera I took in class. I took the lens of a real camera, or I should say off of a ProMaster film camera, took the lens off of it and put it on a digital camera so I could try to get a 35mm film look.
Okay, that went over my head
I
a little
know,
bit.
it probably did. Maybe some people would get it, but
You took a lens off of a real camera?
a film camera.
Oh, a
put it-
film camera and put it on the digital.
Right.
Okay, I get it. I
Right.
get it now.
Just because I
Okay.
like the look, it doesn't look. I can do things with that camera I couldn't do with a digital camera, and I always set my cameras to manual so I can
Adjust it yourself.
adjust it myself as opposed to automatic.
Oh, so you're a bit of an engineer going on here too.
I want to have as much control as possible. So if I can control the aperture, if I can control the image manually myself, because I know what I want.
Okay, okay. And when you say aperture for our audience, what do you mean?
You have shutter speed and aperture. Your aperture is how wide the lens is, the iris.
Okay.
Okay, so it's either going to let in a lot of light or less light.
A little bit.
Right.
Okay,
The
I
shutter
see.
speed is just how fast it exposes the click, and that's how fast the camera's taking a picture or exposing it.
Okay.
It's technical, but it's what I prefer. I prefer to have as much control over creating an image as possible.
Yeah, I would think as a photographer, if you don't control it, I'm not sure that I consider you a photographer. I mean, like if it's that instant, you know, it's got an automatic setting. I'm like, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
And I'm not claiming to be a photographer. You know.
Right. Right.
But I'd like to learn more, and that's why I'm talking to you.
Right.
So you had another photograph that we wanted to hear about. Little boys playing. Could you explain that one?
That again is another example of coming. It's another example of a photograph I took unintentionally. I was actually being hired by a gentleman to take pictures in Southwest as they were developing Southwest into what we see it now. So I was fortunate to be involved with some part of that process. But the day that I took pictures, it was overcast, and I'm walking, and I happened to come upon two boys playing in a water fountain. One was African American, the other was white. So I immediately saw a powerful image. I took the picture, and people viewed it, and they loved it. You know, I'm always hoping for the future, you know, and that picture speaks to me, and it kind of expresses what I believe. You know, that it's going to be the kids who are going to push this world forward. And you know, what better image than two boys who seemingly, you know, are oblivious to each other's race, but they're having fun with each other.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get that across. So when I saw the opportunity for the picture, I took it.
And you just spoke to this. So how do you pick your subjects generally?
It just happens.
Like you see something and it
Yeah.
just might strike your eye.
Yeah, yeah. It just happens.
Can you talk a bit about some of the techniques besides adjusting the aperture? I heard that.
Yeah.
That you use to make a photograph speak to your audience in a particular way.
Sometimes it could be the distance I'm away from the subject. Rather than that, I decide to put the subject right in the center of the picture.
Okay.
It's different techniques that I employ, but it just comes to me right at that second. In order to get natural light,
Yeah.
I don't use a flash. I depend on natural light. So that would
really?
entail, that would entail me maybe circling or positioning the camera just the right way to get enough light, whether it's indoors or outdoors. That's one technique.
Even
I have.
indoors, you use no flash indoors?
No flash.
Okay.
You know, and that to me, it's my desire to make photographs look natural.
Okay.
You know, or if I'm filming something, to make it look as natural as possible. I know how to use lighting, but it's artificial. I mean, in a studio setting, as we're sitting in now, you need lighting, obviously. But
Right.
if it's outdoors and I'm capturing something natural, I want to keep it 100% natural. Now, if I'm doing a portrait for someone, that's a different story. I'm trying to get, I'm trying to get the look that they want.
Right.
When I'm filming for myself or taking a photograph for myself, then I photograph what I want to see.
Okay.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
No, I actually hadn't considered. I hadn't realized that you don't use a flash.
Oh, no,
I
I
just
don't.
assumed everybody did, but a nice, interesting philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind. And how do you compose? Well, or do you compose shots differently for video as opposed to photography?
Pretty much the same, which couldn't quite articulate earlier, or maybe I did. One leads to the other. So the photography, I would film exactly the same way I would take a picture. It's like the same, I'm trying to get the same effect. Just one's moving and one just requires more work, but it's still the same thing. I would compose them both the same.
Okay. And we're kind of nearing the end of our interview, so I want to wrap up with you talking about some more about your distribution network.
I like to think of it as like a exposure network, or I would tell people, one thing to consider. It's this new age we're living in. It's social media, and you can use social media many ways for to advance your career, whatever it may be. So I have a website, but my website has links to a number of sites I used. YouTube, which most people use, but you can set up a channel on YouTube.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be entirely videos of your cat or stuff like that, you know. And then you have Vimeo, which is really geared toward your more artistic videos. You know, it's people's short films. Vimeo.
Oh, it's short films. Oh, I was
right.
going to say, so what's the difference between YouTube and Vimeo? I'm familiar with YouTube, not
Right.
so familiar with Vimeo.
Vimeo, the first thing, it has no advertising on it.
Okay.
You know, yeah, it's primarily made. I hate to use the word artsy or artistic, but it's made for people to be able to post their most creative work, whether it be documentaries, short films, or whatever. So maybe I can't articulate it now, but maybe people can kind of understand. One is sort of more geared toward the mainstream. Everyone watches YouTube, you know,
Right,
but
right.
people would usually search out a video on Vimeo.
Oh, okay. Is Vimeo free?
Yes.
And YouTube is free,
Free
where
as
you
well.
use it anyway.
Right. It's free as well.
Are you on Facebook
I'm
and
on
LinkedIn?
Facebook, LinkedIn, yes, which is a great site to network. So if you're interested in getting into videography, photography, I would strongly recommend you join LinkedIn. It's free, and find the industry that you're specialized in or whatever, and it's a great way to network. So I've done that. I've done Twitter. I haven't done Instagram yet.
How does Twitter work with video?
I haven't used it as much, but it's like Facebook. It's somewhere where I would post something.
Okay.
So when I was using Twitter heavily, I was sort of in a community of other photographers and videographers. So it was more like sharing information that way.
Okay.
I weaned myself off of Twitter because I just simply don't have the time to post all day. You know,
Oh,
I'm not gonna,
okay.
Yeah.
I don't use Twitter, so I'm not
Right.
familiar with how it works, but
Right.
it's I see it can be consuming.
Yeah, it can be time consuming.
Like, I don't use Facebook much for that reason, because once I get on it, I'm like pulled in and I don't have time.
It's bad. It's bad. I tried to wean myself off it 2 weeks ago because of all the news. You know, I just really, you know, it can wear on you, given the current state of the world. You go to Facebook to try to escape it, and everyone's talking about it. What can you do?
Okay, Vince. So we are at the end of our interview almost. And do you have a few last words you'd like to, leave with the audience about pursuing your dream, your artistic dreams?
Empower yourself. You can do it. You know, don't wait for other people to help you do it. It's nice to have people to collaborate with. I've collaborated with team, like an entire team, 10 people. Of my last video was my wife and I, 2 people, and I would look. The next few videos will probably be just the 2 of us. So don't think you need a crew. You need money. You need to go to school for it. It's wide open. There's different ways to empower yourself these days. So empower yourself and follow your dreams.
Thank you very much, Vincent. This has been another episode of Africa's Vision Network. We thank you for joining us this week, and we hope to see you again in the future. Take care.
Uh-oh.